when I ask people, well, what do you think about getting protection for right of conscience? A lot of times doctors will say, well, they can't make me do that. And now that we've had a shift from 30% employed physicians to over 70% now, I wonder if the same people that I've asked before would say the same thing, because now that we have so many employed physicians who really face a conflict of interest between them and their patients when it comes to their employer, because that hospital administration or whoever employed them has so much influence over what they do and can affect their professional image, their reputation in the community, and their license if they want to, because they can submit complaints to the medical board, and there's no due process there in that system. So and I think most doctors realize this now. So I think when it comes to the most extreme examples like assisted suicide, no, we do not have any cases in the United States where a physician has been forced to kill a patient. However, none of these things just happen overnight because it wouldn't work, right? And I want to show you examples of why I think that this is still the goal for those who control medicine, to make you end people's lives when it's time, according to their numbers, but also anything else that they might want you to do, even if you don't think it's a good idea. And as Dr. Dunn had mentioned before, the thought leaders are the ones who set those ideas out there and repeat them, and we can ignore them, but they really are influential and they are guiding policy. And so we do have to pay attention to what they're saying. And they start with little ways of changing your independent thinking, and they make you do things that maybe don't hurt the patient now, change the drug, change the regimen, how long you decide to treat, etc. And eventually you get used to the idea of being told what to do. So some of the things that we need to think about in this issue are you a hireling or are you a professional? Are you in a contractual situation between you and the patient or you and the employer where you do what they tell you to do and your job is just to comply? Or are you a professional and you have a covenantal relationship with the patient and you have pledged your knowledge and skill and to do the best that you can and to use your medical judgment to do the best you can for that patient? And when it comes to being asked to do something that you didn't think is right, the big question is that an elective or non-elective service? If you're an ER physician, we all agree that you are not going to ethically be able to refuse to save someone's life. But if it's a non-elective service that you're being asked to do, then can you refuse to provide that service if the patient claims to have a right to it? And abortion is one of the issues that has come up already multiple times in the United States, in which a resident or a physician either had their job threatened or their position at the hospital threatened if they didn't participate in abortion procedures. So that's an issue that's already been faced by multiple physicians, and there are some protections in states, and especially in the state of Texas, we do have that protection. But it's obvious that there's always someone out there who wants to force you to do something that you may not want to do. So when the Canadian law was passed, and I say sort of it was passed because it really started off as a Supreme Court ruling in Canada, and then they followed with the law. They didn't start off passing a law and then rule whether it was constitutional. So the Supreme Court ruled that it was legal, and so their parliament quickly followed with and scrambled to get a law on the books. And I happened to be in Canada, in Ottawa, at the time that they were debating it, and I had an amazing opportunity to watch some of this debate. And I left with a couple of impressions. One, there was nobody there. There was no opposition. It was completely polite and proper proceeding. And they began discussing the difference between may and shall, whether or not the physician may or shall do the procedure. Well, that's an interchangeable word in their mind. So that took about 15, 20 minutes. And then it started to shift to, well, I think the word is must. The physician must participate in this. This is what they have to do because the patient has a right. So you can see where that went real fast. And in fact, right now, I think there's some battles in Canada because that's the situation, is this physician is expected to comply. Well, New England Journal of Medicine jumped on that right away as soon as the Supreme Court in Canada did that, and they made this statement: societies are changing, and in coming decades, aging populations with growing affluence and incidence of chronic illness will increasingly question the medical and legal orthodoxies regarding the end of life. Given the flow of legal ideas and shifting demographics, change and convergence around physician-assisted dying as a standard of care seem inevitable. And the key word here is standard of care. So now you go from having a right to this service or this treatment that you want that ends your life to it being considered a standard of care. So that's where we have to start to be careful, and this is where it always leads. Patient rights become standard of care. They're, in Colombia, the doctors don't have a choice. They have to euthanize by law if the patients ask for it or if they are asked to do it. And this was written by Ezekiel Emanuel. He said, healthcare professionals who are unwilling to accept these limits have two choices. Select an area of medicine, such as radiology, that will not put them in situations that conflict with their personal morality, or, if there is no such area, leave the profession. Nice. So, in his view, if you have a moral objection to any procedure, you shouldn't be a doctor. And I've heard this sentiment expressed multiple times. They're serious about this. Again, these are thought leaders that are very influential. So you have to remember that it should not be taken lightly. When California passed its assisted suicide law, after it had been in place for a year, a lot of people wanted to review and look at the results. And this was published in the Journal of Internal Medicine, and what they found was that there were requests for assisted suicide, but not enough physicians who were willing to do that. And so the comment by the author here was that although physicians should clearly not be forced to write lethal prescriptions, such conscientious objection affects access to physician-assisted death. There is a potential for injustice. So this would be considered an injustice because you've now limited access to this kind of care that you want. Again, these are the thought leaders of our nation, and they're being published in the Journal of Internal Medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine. This is their view, and they affect policy. They have a microphone here, and this is what we need to be cautious of. And Margaret Dorr is an attorney that has been actually fighting assisted suicide for a long time. She's very good at the way she writes things, and I liked her perspective here because it's not just about things like assisted suicide, for sure. There are lots of times when you can be asked to do something that you don't think is right for the patient, that may or may not harm that patient, but you're being told that your medical judgment doesn't matter anymore. And that's what she was saying, because so many times these laws are written as, well, if you're not going to do it, then you should refer to someone who will. The significance of do or refer is that it is anti-patient by not allowing doctors to use their best judgment for a patient. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Meyer real quick, because he's going to give you some of the history behind all this.